All right, everyone, we're going to get started with our afternoon session. I hope you enjoyed your luxurious lunch. You know that we're big on providing really high-end dining for CDP. So, I'm so really happy to introduce Dr. Kelly Young, who is a clinical professor at UCLA and director of the Pediatric EM Fellowship Program, and she's going to talk to us about time management. Thanks.
Hi, thank you for having me. Okay. How do I advance the slides? Oh, there we go. Okay, I have no financial disclosures. There is no handout for this session, so what I've done is I've added to my website, pemsource.org, a tab called Wellness, and everything that I'm speaking on, all the ideas are listed on that website, so that'll be a handout, and it'll be a living handout, so as I find more ideas and more things for time management, I'll add it to those tabs. So no need to take notes, no need for handouts. Some of this has come out with the idea of burnout in emergency medicine. I think we all know that when they've looked at studies, emergency medicine is a high burnout field. We're the winners. You can see us at the top there. It's looked at 2011 and 2014. I think in academic emergency medicine, though, we're lucky that we have avoided some of the issues of burnout because a lot of burnout is related to feeling happy with the work that you're doing, and in academic emergency medicine, you combine the clinical practice and the academic work, and that helps a lot with the burnout. One thing that is really helpful for emergency medicine is we are one of the top specialties, though, that feels that we have enough time for personal and family work. And that's important in terms of work-life balance. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how we manage that time so that we can maximize our time for our work as well as for our home life. So when they look at burnout, they look at the things that happen with burnout. And what can happen is you can have this sort of cycle of burnout where you're not feeling productive, you don't feel like you've accomplished what you want to accomplish, you're not managing your time well, you don't feel like you're doing well, and then you become burnt out. And that kind of just lowers your energy and your enthusiasm. You're feeling burnt out and exhausted, and it's a cycle. You become less productive, and it just feeds into it. What you want to do is get into an engagement cycle. So you feel like you're accomplishing something, you feel great about what you're doing, and then you become more engaged in your work, and that leads you to being less burnt out and even more engaged, which leads you to accomplish even more and be more productive. So you want that productivity cycle on the right and avoid the burnout cycle on the left. And time management can be a really important part of that because it helps you be productive and feel like you're achieving a lot so that you can get into the productivity cycle on the right. So what are the drivers of burnout? Some of them, as you look here, are things that time management can feed into. So things like workload and job demands, efficiency and resources, and work-life integration. It's important to have good time management skills so that we can control these and not have burnout from them. So out of burnout came this whole concept of wellness, and there's a lot about wellness in all areas, including emergency medicine, and these are a lot of the words that are associated with wellness. So people are starting to think, well, what can we do to improve our wellness? And a lot of things that will come up are, well, you should exercise regularly, you should sleep. When I say that to emergency physicians, they laugh. You should have hobbies, you should have good time with your friends and family, good social relationship time, mindfulness activities, healthy eating, all those things. And what is the commonality of all those things? You have to have time to achieve those. So time management skills, again, becomes very important in terms of achieving wellness, to be able to have time for all the activities that you need for wellness. So first, though, you need to step back and set your goals, because if you create a large amount of time for yourself by being efficient, using all the time management techniques that you can learn, but you're spending that time on things that don't feed into your ultimate career goals, then you're not helping yourself into that productivity cycle, right? So for example, earlier in my career, I kind of fell into a rut where I was doing some hospital metrics that required chart review and chasing down residents and having them review charts. It took a lot of time. And gathering this data and presenting it to the hospital on a monthly basis. And in the end, I'm not sure how much people in the hospital were really looking at these data. Certainly nothing was really coming about changing from it. And it was really just a rut because that was what I did. It was assigned to me, I did it well. I managed my time efficiently so I could get it done. But in the end, when I looked at my goals, my career goals, what I wanted to do, and I looked at this activity, it was not forwarding my career goals. It wasn't something I really enjoyed doing, and I was spending a lot of time on it. So it's important to set our goals correctly first, to know what we want to spend our time on before we approach time management. And in academics, we've always talked about the triple threat. We've probably heard of that. You need to be a good clinician, a good educator, and then a good researcher, or I would say now a scholar, a scholarly activity of some sort. But really there's a different triple threat that we should think about, and that's our work-life balance. So all three of the blue circles really feed into the one pink circle of work. And then there's two other really important circles, which is your family, your relationships with your family and friends, and then your self-care, the light blue circle. And the light blue circle, the self-care, is what tends to fall by the wayside as everything else picks up. And so another important part of time management is deciding what your balance is, your personal balance for those three circles. This is an article. A lot of stuff on time management and work-life balance will come out of the business world, and it can be very helpful to read, and I found this article very helpful. In summary, you want to think to yourself, what gives me energy and engages me? What do I really love doing? What puts me in that productivity cycle? Because I'm engaged, I'm excited, so I'm achieving things because I'm so engaged with it, and then that kind of feeds into more achievement. And how often am I doing those things? Or am I spending a lot of time on things that are not engaging me? If I could spend 2 extra hours a day, what would I do with those hours? And then what are a few things that I really need in my life to have wellness and work-life balance? So for one person, it may be, I really need to carve out time for myself to have a morning run 3 times a week. For someone else, maybe it's, I really need to be able to volunteer in my kids' school, or I need to be able to coach the soccer team. That's just really important to me. For another person, you know, I'm a sleeper. I don't think emergency medicine people have too many of those, but maybe I really need 7 hours of sleep. Like, I just have to have that. And so looking at yourself and being honest with yourself, what do I really need to be happy and to be productive? And then mapping that out in all 3 of those circles on the right. So what are my goals for both work, but also for family and for self-care? And 10 years from now, if I looked back at my current work-life balance, would I have any regrets? If you talk to senior people or your mentors or people who are senior in department, sometimes you'll hear a little of that wistfulness. You know, now that I look back, I wish I'd done more of this or that. And I think that can be very helpful to listen to them and hear what they're saying. I just spoke in the junior faculty development session, and they were talking about mentors, and I said, I feel like it's really good to have a mentor or a role model that has the work-life balance that you want, and then you can talk to them and find out, how did they achieve that work-life balance? Do they regret anything? Would they do anything different? And that can help you decide what your work-life balance is. So each person's balance in those 3 circles might be different. And we need to be able to respect that amongst each other and say, okay, for that person, that's their work-life balance. For me, it's heavier in this circle or that circle, and decide what we want for ourselves. So now, once you've decided what your work-life balance is and what your goals are, it can be very helpful to write them down. And it seems kind of hokey. It seems like something that you talk about doing, but you don't actually do. You don't have to show anybody, so you can just write it down and keep it like in your desk underneath some paper. But it can be really helpful to write it down, because this is what you'll come back to when you're trying to decide, do I say yes or no to this project? Is this something helpful to me or not? Am I spending a lot of time doing something that's not forwarding my goals? You'll be able to come back to this. So writing down your work goals, you know, I want to be a leader in this area, I want to write this grant, I want to publish this, I want to be a part of this committee and work my way up to the leadership in that role, I want to be the program director for my department. Writing down those goals, And then writing down your family goals. I would like to volunteer in the classroom once a week. I would like to be the coach of the baseball team. I would like to make sure that our family has a meal together at least once every day if possible. And then your self-care goals. I want to do this type of exercise twice a week. I want to take this class. I need 6 hours of sleep at night, 7 hours of sleep at night, whatever it is. I want to read one non-medical book a month. Whatever your goal might be, writing it down, that's how you're going to hold yourself accountable. So you can look back at that list and say, yes, I am meeting those goals. No, I'm not. And that's how you're going to be able to prioritize where you spend your time. So it can be really helpful to actually write all this down. I like this concept, ikigai, and the Japanese are very popular right now with Marie Kondo and all of that, but ikigai is the idea that you want to try to find something that is the intersection of these 4 circles. What you love, what the world needs, what you can be paid for, and what you're good at. And if you can find the intersection of all 4 of those circles, you have found the, quote, reason for being, or you will feel fulfilled. I think in emergency medicine we're very lucky because we have 2 of the circles pretty much down. The world needs us, and we can be paid for it. We can make arguments about how much we're being paid, but we generally speaking are being paid for what we're doing. So now we need to find the other 2 circles, right? What we love and what we're good at. And so it is important, we just talked about prioritizing and your goals and spending your time on something that you love. So it is important to find that area within academic emergency medicine that you love so that you're eager and want to work on it. And then what you're good at. I think time management feeds into a lot of that feeling of whether or not you're good at something. So if you manage your time effectively and you accomplish a lot in that area, then you will feel that you are good at it and you will have achieved ikigai. A lot of times we are good at something, we could be good at something, but we're not managing our time effectively, or we're spending our time on things that aren't furthering our career goals, and so we don't feel like we're good because we're not achieving the productivity that we'd like to achieve. So some of it has to do with not necessarily being actually good at something, but just being able to show that ourselves that we're good at it by accomplishing. So what would happen with time management, and as I say, I became interested in time management when I had 3 kids because you become very interested in time management when your life is that full, is I would look at these women's magazines that I would read, and it would always have some article, how I get this done, how I am this superwoman that has kids and is achieving at my work and keep my, with my spouse and everything. And I would eagerly open the magazine, and it almost always said, I get up at 4:30 in the morning. And that just didn't work for me. So I wanted to find other ways of time management besides getting up first thing in the morning. And I did read a great book over the weekend that was recommended to me by Dr. Hockberger, who also speaks a lot on time management, called What the Most Successful People Do Before Breakfast, which is it had a lot of great ideas in it. But one of them was to get up earlier before breakfast and do this work. And there are those of us who are night people who that doesn't work for. I think the concept is there that you want to identify the time when you can get a lot done. It may not necessarily be before breakfast, and then concentrate that time. So these are the time management tools that we will discuss. Each of these has a tab on the website, pemsource.org, under Wellness. So again, no need to take notes. It's all there. And it will be a little bit of a living website. So as I get more ideas or read more things from articles, I will go in there. Most of what I have is from reading various articles, again, a lot of times in the business literature, and then from reading a few books. So first of all, what's really important is figuring out where your time is going. And when they've done studies, they found that employees waste about 3 hours of an 8-hour workday on unproductive things like email, socializing, internet, social media. They found a fair amount of fantasy football. I think there's probably a lot of Game of Thrones action going on right now. Spacing out, maybe catching up on charting. That's not necessarily completely unproductive, but it's not necessarily forwarding our career goals. So finding out where we're spending all that time, and I don't know if any of you have had this, but you'll have an 8-hour day in the office, And you look at your calendar, you're like, I can't believe I have this. I don't have a shift. I'm not post-shift. I don't have a meeting. I'm going to get so much done. At the end of this 8 hours, that chapter is going to be written. That grant is going to be mostly ready to go in. And you go in and you work, and at the end of the 8 hours, you're like, where did my time go? Why is this not done? I didn't achieve everything I was going to achieve. And some of this can be the amount of time that was spent doing other things, possibly wasted. So what can be really helpful with time management, and all the time management experts will recommend that you actually log your time for a week. It's again, something that seems hokey, just like writing down your goals, but if you really are serious about improving your productivity and your time management, and you really suspect that there may be issues there, it can be really helpful. So you actually log, a written log, or there's apps that you can use, everything that you're done for a week in your time management, including home. And then you can take a look at that log and you can see, wow, I'm really spending a lot of time on this task that is low value, or I'm not even sure anyone in my department actually wants these numbers anymore, or I think really somebody else could in the department, a secretary could do this, why am I doing this? You might find, okay, this is my before breakfast time. This is the time where I have peace and quiet, I can get a lot done, I'm focused, I'm at my best, and I need to match the high-value tasks in my life to that time period. So my before breakfast time is actually from 10 p.m. to about 2 a.m. My family, for the most part, goes to bed. I'm a night owl. I'm up. That is the time that I know I can get a lot done. So managing my time so that I'm going to really focus on important tasks during that time is what I need to do. So looking at your time management log, you can also see, of course, when you've wasted time, when you have activities that you could maybe delegate out, when you have activities that you're being interrupted a lot, and maybe you just need to remove yourself from the interruptions to get something done. It can be very helpful with this log also to see really, really how much time you're spending on things like sleep, on family, preparing dinner, all the mundane things of your world, and how much time do you want to spend on those things, and are they matching up? And you can kind of adjust your goals based on what you find on your time management log. And both setting your goals and then looking at your time management log for a week is something you may want to do every few years, every 3 or 4 years. Your goals may change. Your time management may change. Kids get older. They spend less time with you, but then the time they spend with you is less predictable. All of a sudden, at 1 in the morning, they want to have deep talks. So things change over your lifetime, and so looking at that again and again can be helpful. So once you've done your time management log and you've looked at the activities that you're doing, you can prioritize them. And this is from Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. But you can, according to him, you can categorize most of your tasks into one of these 4 categories. So we have our urgent, important tasks. Those are tasks on a deadline. Those are our shifts. We have to do those. Those are things that are on a deadline, crises that come up that just really need to be done. And then the non-urgent important stuff, that's where the good stuff is. That's where all the stuff that will make us feel more productive, that will make us advance our careers and feel like we're really achieving something is there. It's important writing manuscripts, completing our research, submitting grant applications, developing our skills, developing our expertise. But it's not urgent because there's no deadline on it. And so there's something that we tend to sort of shift off in favor of the bottom left box, which is urgent and non-important. So a lot of that will crop up in our world. And those are the people will come into your office, it seems very urgent, right? It's urgent to them. Can you do this? We need to meet with ortho, we need to set this policy, somebody needs to write this, I have a chapter in my book, do you want to write one? It's urgent for them. It's not that important in terms of it's not advancing your career. When you open your list of goals, it doesn't fit in anywhere on your goals. But we can tend to kind of put ourselves in that bottom left box a little too much because other people make it seem urgent to us, and we let our not urgent important things go away. And then there's the not urgent, non-important things, and those are, a lot of email time, a lot of time on Twitter, Game of Thrones, Netflix binges, whatever, Yahoo News, whatever your poison is, and we all need a little bit of that to entertain ourselves, but when we look at our time management log, we may realize that we're spending too much time on those things. I'll talk a little bit later about how to find how much time you're spending on some of these things as well. But if you can categorize your activities in these 4 boxes, and look at your time management log, you can decide, am I spending enough time on the really important ones, the top 2 boxes? And the urgent important things you need to just do, but the not urgent important things you need to set a deadline for yourself and kind of make yourself do. And then the urgent and not important things you may want to delegate or say no to or try some other way to get those done. And then the not urgent, not important things you want to cut back on if you can. This comes from a blog post from Rebel EM that I thought was very helpful. A lot of it has to do with managing technology, so if that's an issue, that is a great blog post for you. But one thing that came out of this was this triangle and asking yourself for each activity, is this something enjoyable and really of interest to me? So when I look at this activity on my to-do list, does my heart get pumping a little? I'm excited to do this. I'm going to pick this up. And then, is this something that is helpful to my career or to my department? Is it going to get me some good karma in some way? It's going to help me with networking. It's going to get me some leadership. It's going to advance my career in some way. It's making me a great team player for my department, which is going to be looked on well. And then, is this something that I can be compensated for in either time or money? Because money can buy you time, of course. So is this something that I'm going to get something back out of? And if it doesn't meet at least 2 of those 3 things, it's not really a high value activity. And what really is important is if it meets 0 of those 3 things, and we all do actually have activities, if we look closely, that don't meet any of these. We're doing this because we think it's expected of us, but it's not really that important to the department. It's just something that we've been doing because we feel like we've been doing it forever. It's not enjoyable to us anymore. We're not getting anything out of it. We're not compensated for it. It's just sitting there on our calendar, and we're doing it. And it's important to identify those activities and then maybe speak to our supervisors, speak to the department, and see if that's something that we need to keep doing. So once you've identified activities that are not in your management and not in your important box and are not meeting 2 out of 3 on the triangle and you want to say no, or something's being offered to you and you want to say no to it, how do you say no? If you are in a more junior position and you have a mentor, you can talk to your mentor about whether or not it's something that you should say no to. You can look and make sure that it's something that is in an important box. If it's something that you can't meet the deadline, you're going to want to say no to it. You don't want to be that person, right, that never meets the deadlines, because people are going to stop offering you things if you're not meeting the deadlines. So you have to be honest with yourself about what you currently have on your plate. One thing that I think comes up a lot is very vague projects. So someone has a big idea, and they come to you, and they're like, we should do this. Isn't this a great idea? And they haven't really thought it out. And what they're really asking is, you should think about everything about this and do all the legwork and then come back to me. They have it in a very vague state, right? And so to be able to turn that around and say, that is a great idea. Why don't we think about this, that, and the other thing? Come back to me when you have some more thoughts about that. But don't let someone with a very vague, big idea dump that in your lap for you to do all the legwork and develop. Unless it's something that's very exciting to you, of course, and that would further your career and something you really want to work on. Something that's not in your wheelhouse is probably not something that you want to say yes to necessarily. So if you're really focusing your career in one area and you're developing your niche and something very out of the blue is being offered to you, if that's going to add a lot of time and take you away from your focus, then that's not something you want to say yes to. And then something called weighing the yes to stress ratio, so getting an idea for how stressful saying yes to this project would be to you. So I like this quote from This Side of Doctoring, Reflections from Women in Medicine. In the big picture, there is still time to write papers, network, attend national meetings, and give grand rounds. But if you did not take the afternoon off to go to your child's second grade play, that opportunity is lost forever. I think what's really important about this quote is it helps remind you that saying yes to something always means you're saying no to something else. You're just doing it silently. You're not doing it out loud, but you are, because you have a specific amount of time in your day and in your life, right? So if you say yes to this project and that project, it really means you're cutting back. The first circle to go probably is self-care. So first thing you're going to cut back on is your own sleep, your exercise, your hobbies, your non-medical life, which can be very important for your wellness. The second thing to go will be your family, because you know your family stands by you, they understand, but you'll be letting go of those little things. Oh, you'll miss this game, you'll miss that play, you won't go out, your dates with your spouse will kind of slip by and you'll stop scheduling them. And so even though you're not saying it out loud, you're not going to your spouse and saying, I do not want to go on a date with you anymore, it slips away, right? So saying yes to something means saying no to something else, and realizing that can really help you and give you the ability to say no to some things that are not on your high value list. So how to say no. And there is a link on the website to some business websites that give you even more ideas. But some of the big ones are the good cop, bad cop. So who can be your bad cop? Your chair, your mentor if you have one, your supervisor, your spouse, even your kids can be your bad cop, right? You basically use them as an excuse. I would love to do this. My spouse would kill me if I committed to one more thing. I've really told my spouse that I'm going to cut back. Or, I would love to do this. I spoke to my mentor. He really wants me to focus in this area. We've decided that that's going to be the area that I really need to work on, and unfortunately I can't. So using somebody else as your bad cop. And then no, but yes. So, I cannot develop an entire SIM curriculum for the residency, but I'd be happy to do one case and work with somebody who's developing the other cases. I can't speak for you in the month of May. My calendar is just completely full. I'm free if you want to schedule something in September. I would love to do that. I can't develop a brand new lecture on this topic, but I do have a lecture on this topic if that's something that you would work with you in your curriculum. So no, but yes, offering what you can do, partial or in the future, something you already have. They talk about the no sandwich, so kind of a positive, then the no, and then another positive. Thank you so much for thinking of me. That's really great. I'm so excited. Unfortunately, I don't have the bandwidth right now to do that particular thing, but hey, in the future, I would love to work with you, keeping it positive. Most time management experts will recommend that you just say no and get it over with. That's the most helpful to the person that's asking you. They need to fill a slot to do something so they can move on if you don't keep them kind of waiting. But if you panic, then you can just buy some time really quickly and then come back with a no. But if you can, just say it quickly and get it over with. And sometimes having a stock excuse can be helpful for that. So if you already kind of have in your mind what your stock excuse will be for projects that you need to say no to, that will be helpful. All right, next in your time management tools is thinking about distractions and procrastination. So in this day and age, our phone can be a huge distraction. I don't know if you know that the iPhones have this app called Screen Time. You can actually look and see how much time you spend on your phone. It can be very illuminating. You can see here that I spent a good amount of time on Twitter. I blame Seth Trigger for that, and Michelle Lynn. But you can look and see how much time you're spending on your phone, and then you need to think about ways, if you are spending too much time on your phone or on certain websites, to lock yourself away. So there are apps that you can use. Here's one example, but there are many. And you can actually look at how long you're spending on each different type of app. You can use Screen Time, but you can also use the app to look at particular websites that you're looking at or particular apps you're going on and log the amount of time. And then you can actually block yourself. So you can say, I really need to focus on this project. This is my before breakfast time. I'm going to spend it writing. I'm not going to get on my phone. And I'm going to set this app to block me. So it's really going to keep me off my phone and keep me focused and working. You can do this as well for the computer. So there's this particular website app is Rescue Time, but there's several other ones. And you can use it to look and see what you're doing on your computer. You can find out, am I actually going on Amazon a lot more than I realized? Am I headed over to CNN and reading the news more than I thought I was? Am I spending a lot of time, looking at this or that website? And then you can use it also to block yourself for an amount of time as well. So when you really need to focus, you can just block yourself and focus on those things. The other important thing to think about is actually working at work. There's a book I read called Eat That Frog. By, I think it's Brian Taylor, and the idea is that the frog is the really important big ticket item that you need to get done. So whether it's a piece of writing you need to finish, something that's important that's going to advance your career, and you tend to not do it because it's hard to get done. It's it takes a little bit of extra effort, and his thing is just eat that frog, just get it over with. Get it done. And so you want to do that during your high value time period, right? Your before breakfast time, whatever that is for you, that you get a lot of stuff done. And that means that you have to be not distracted and you have to be focused to get it done. And so sometimes that means you have to close your door to keep from distractions out. And what he talks about, and I really liked, he talked about you want to shoot for quality time at work so that you can have quantity time at home. And I think that's the opposite of a lot of times what you'll hear like, oh, spend quality time with your kids, right? kids don't really respect quality time. Like, you can't go to kids and say, I want to have some quality time with you right now. When they're young, maybe you can, but when they're teens, when they're older, they're just like, I'm sorry, I'm on the phone. So at some point, your teen will come to you with some deep question, and there'll be this big, long conversation you'll have, but you don't get to schedule it. So you need to have quantity time at home, so you just happen to be home during that time, and then quality time at work, so you get your stuff done at work and get it done quickly. So sometimes that means you have to close your door. Sometimes it can mean going somewhere else to work. I called my Starbucks office, but you can go to a coffee house, you go to the library. They actually have remote work areas now people can go to. If you have a long commute, it can be helpful to get a driver or use public transportation so that you can work on that commute. And it sounds silly. You're like, I'm not going to hire a driver? That seems crazy, right? But if you think about saying no to one thing means saying yes to something else, if you say no to hiring a driver, that means that or if you don't hire a driver, if you say yes to hiring a driver, it will help you to have more time so that you could spend with your family. So when you look at your time management log, if you're really spending a lot of time commuting, maybe that is a solution that you could think about. I actually have one friend who has 5 kids, and she would schedule herself little retreats in a hotel in her own city, with her spouse's blessing, of course, and she really needed to get something done, a big grant application, something major. She would just take the weekend and go to a hotel and really hammer it out. But sometimes you need to create that time for yourself. Dealing with procrastination. So this is in that book, Eat That Frog is a great thing. It's all about procrastination. There's an article I read called Tuesdays to Write, where he talks about setting aside a certain day to write. That's the idea, though, of identifying, using your time management log and identifying when your before breakfast time is. When can you find a big chunk of time where you're focused, where you're at your best, and then schedule that time for you to do the project you need to work on. And for us, it's often in academics, it's writing. Really scheduling a block of time that you're going to work on something and actually putting it on your calendar. So that if someone comes into you and says, oh, hey, can you write this policy? You open up your calendar and you're like, oh, look at my calendar, it's so full. Because you've actually put in the time to write, and you've put in your exercise, and you've put in your dates with your spouse. And if it's all on your calendar looks full, and it discourages other people from filling your calendar with things that aren't important to you. The other thing that can be really helpful with procrastination is using checklists and breaking everything down to really small bits that are doable. So what happens is, on your to-do list, it says, write your manuscript. And you look at that every so often, and there's a million other things. You need to do evaluations on the residents, and you need to write a little policy for nursing, and you need to, whatever else you need to do, respond to this email and that email. And it's so much easier to do those little things, right? But they're not forwarding your career. And that stays on your to-do list, that write the manuscript stays on your to-do list, and you feel unproductive. But if you take that and you make a checklist out of it and you make it into little tiny boxes, so it's not write a manuscript, it's write the introduction, or it's read 5 background articles and summarize them, or it's write out the methodology, or whatever it might be, then you can do one thing and check it off, and you'll have that good feeling of achievement, and then it feeds into that productivity cycle. Now you're engaged, you're excited, you feel like you're doing well, you're progressing, you can see your progression. So I'm a big believer in checklists and breaking everything down to small tasks and letting myself check off as much stuff, because every time I check a box, it makes me feel really good about myself. And then they talk about, when you do this checklist, when you get in, you start, just complete one task really quickly. The easiest one, get that over with, brainless, get it done, check a box, you feel good about yourself, and then do the worst first one, eat the frog. So after that, you've checked off one thing, and now just get the big one over with, and when you check that off, you'll feel so good. So set that time aside, eat that frog, and get that over with. And then you can save a reward for yourself. So what's your reward? Maybe it really bothers you to not have checked your email. It's really bugging you. Or maybe you want that morning coffee. Whatever it might be. Maybe you want to go out in the hallway and chat and socialize with your coworkers a little bit. So force yourself to have those couple tasks you're going to finish first and save that other thing for a reward, and tell yourself, when I get done, after I've eaten that frog, I'm going to go check my email, or I'm going to go get myself a coffee, whatever it may be. Creating an audience can be a good way to keep yourself from procrastinating. So that's why people choose to exercise together, right? They say, oh, I'm going to take this class with you. And then now you've created an audience. If I don't go to the yoga class, my friend knows I didn't go, and then we're not going to be there. So that same thing can happen with your projects at work. You can set a meeting with someone you're working with You can set a meeting with your mentor, and you can say, okay, we're going to go over the introduction that I've written when I meet with you on this day. If you're working with a resident or a fellow on a project, work on this, and we'll meet, and we'll have it together. Sometimes there's some background work that you need to do before you can meet the resident or fellow. That will get you in gear. So creating an audience sets an artificial deadline for yourself. And that's the same thing with Race the Clock. Kind of set an artificial deadline for yourself so that you can kind of create a sense of urgency and put it into that urgent, important box. Making an agenda is more about the same thing of putting it on the calendar. I like to make an agenda of what I'm doing for the week and then for the day as well. So like I'll have an overall to-do list, and then I put post-its each day. This is what I'm actually going to accomplish this day. A list of the things I'm going to accomplish that day, check them off, feel really good about it. Anything that didn't get done that day, I can put on the next day's list. But you can get a feel for what the progression that you're achieving, and that give you that positive feedback. And then everyone has those days where you just didn't get much done. Days where, like, I get kind of, I love suitcases. I get kind of obsessed. I spend way too much time looking at different suitcases on the internet. And I realize, oh man, I just spent too much time doing internet shopping, or maybe I spent too much time looking at my email, whatever it may be. Just take a do-over. So go take a little walk, sit down, look at the time that you have left, map it out, say, okay, now I have this much time left. I'm going to really focus, and I'm going to, set aside and turn off everything, and I'm going to get this done in this time that's left. This is a cute app that I found where you plant a tree. Basically, your tree will not grow if you go away from the app. So if you go off the app and you go to your Facebook or your email or whatever it is on your phone, your tree dies. So you want to keep your tree alive, and the way you do that is by focusing on the project at hand. So it's another way to lock yourself out, basically block yourself from whatever is distracting you. Email is a big one. It's a big reason why we get distracted, and it has a way of making itself seem urgent, but it's often not important. Most time management experts in the business world will recommend that you set a couple time periods a day when you're going to check email and not check it constantly throughout the day. I know that can be really hard, but if you really think about it, when you look at your email, very few emails are really important that you need to reply to in the next hour or so. Most of the time it would be fine if you didn't see that for 4 hours or even 8 hours. So if you set a time period in the morning, maybe you're like going to get your frog eaten, and then you'll check your email at 10, and then you're going to get more work done, and you'll check your email again at 3. You can have a couple times a day. If that's not enough, you could set maybe 3 or 4 times a day. But the idea is that if you are checking your email constantly, what happens is you're task switching a lot. So what happens is you're working really hard on your book chapter, you're in the groove, you're writing great, and then you see a bunch of email notifications at the bottom of your screen. You're like, oh, I should check my email. So you go to your email, and you go through all those, you get those done, and then you go back to your book chapter, and now it takes a little bit of startup time to get back into it. You're not in the groove anymore. You need to figure out where were your thoughts, what were you thinking. Maybe you didn't write down or outline what your next thoughts were, and what was that idea I had? I was going to put something in there, and I can't remember it now. So it's all that startup time and task switching time that you want to avoid. With emails, you want to try to handle them once if possible. Most emails, you can do that. You can just delete them. You could reply really quickly and then file them away or delete them. There's very few emails that you have to sit in your inbox that you need to find out something more to get back to. So you really want to try to handle them quickly and then avoid unnecessary replies. This is kind of a departmental thing, trying to train your department not to reply to all. But avoiding that unnecessary amount of emails. Another thing that can be really helpful is unsubscribing. We all get kind of subscribed as we go through life to a lot of different sites that we don't realize, and just going through and unsubscribing those. Turning off notifications so you won't be tempted to constantly check your email. If you don't see that little number at the bottom, if you don't get the ping, then you won't know that a new email came in. And then keeping your email organized can be really helpful, because a lot of times you have to reply and you need some information from a previous email. And if you can just go to the right folder and search it, that can be really helpful. So again, you don't want to waste a lot of time with that. The next thing with time management that's really important is organization. And a lot of times you've allowed yourself to get a little disorganized in one area. So your desk has gotten a little messier, your stuff's kind of out and about, maybe at home things are disorganized. And you think to yourself, well, yeah, I'd like to get organized, but I don't have the time. This is the whole idea, right? I don't have the time. But if you think about it, if you blocked out some time and really just sat down and organized whatever it was, your desk, you're going to save yourself so much time in the future, right? So it's all about taking that chunk of time and really spending it now so that you can save yourself the time in the future from being disorganized. So what you have to do is put it on your agenda. So you find that high value chunk of time that you have and you put on your agenda, I'm going to clean my desk, I'm going to organize this project, whatever it is going to be. And then they talk about, in time management with work, keeping your projects organized together. So if you're working on a big grant, if you're working on some big project, keeping that all in a file of some sort, folders. So again, you minimize that startup time every time you go back to it. That's the idea. And they talk about, if possible, if your desk is big enough, if you're working on a big project, to leave it laid out so you can really get back into it right away. But if you can't do that, having it organized in folders so that every time you come back to it, you don't spend 15, 20, 30 minutes getting back into it, you're ready to go right away. That can be really helpful. I also use a lot of apps that can help you organize yourself both in your work and your home life. So there's several alternatives to these as well. Evernote is a popular one that can help you organize all of your work documents, ideas, lists, things like that. TripIt or other travel apps can be really helpful for organizing your travel, keeping that together. Cloud services I think are important. We always want to make sure that we don't lose a file. That's a horrible time management thing where you've sent all your work on a file and then you forgot to back it up and it's gone. And the cloud drives can help you with that because they're auto-updating. But it can also help you because if you have a little spot of time to work on something and you don't have your computer, but you've got your phone or you've got a tablet or you've got access to another computer, you can get onto your cloud drive and find the file and you'll be able to work on it. Or if you're responding to email and you need a file, you can look at it from your phone and then respond to the email and get that done. So it's very helpful to have your things on a cloud drive. And then Secure Safe is what I use for passwords, but it's very helpful to have a password manager. In this day and age, there's so many passwords to everything. You can spend a lot of time trying to remember it, look it up. You can lock yourself out, which really is not time efficient. So having those passwords available can really be helpful as well. At home, it's very important to be organized. If you have family and kids, it's helpful to have a family calendar that everyone can access. Particularly if you and your spouse are both have a lot of things going on, it can be helpful to see each other's. I kept ours color-coded with our kids, and then every Sunday night I would write on a dry erase board everything that was going on for the next week. That kept our family organized. Everyone knew what everyone was doing. It also helped me plan because I would realize then, oh my gosh, I didn't realize so-and-so has a soccer game on Thursday and I need to find him a ride there. So it helped me plan that out and know what was coming. It also helped us plan our dinners and plan everything that we needed for the week. Being a working parent, I had to be really proactive to make sure I got all the dates. And so I came to know that my elementary school had a calendar in the back that had, the third grade play in May was already up there in October. And so I could go in and find all those dates and put them in my calendar right away. Because what happens, particularly if you live in a community where there's a lot of non-working parents, is the school doesn't bother to tell you until a week before, and then you've got to trade a shift to get there. So you can save yourself so much time in the future if you find all the dates and get them on your calendar early, because then you're not trading shifts and trying to find coverage. And when you trade shifts, a lot of times you trade into an inopportune shift, so then you're impacting your own sleep and your own wellness, and you're taking away from your own time management. So keeping a schedule and being really, really aggressive about getting everything on the schedule can be very important for time management. At home, I like to keep a lot of lists. These are some ideas to help keep myself organized at home. Of course, you have a grocery list, but we also had a dinner ideas list because my husband's a critical care physician. We would come home and we'd be like, what do you want for dinner? I don't know. We had decision fatigue. I'm like, you're making decisions about whether people come off the ventilator, and I'm making decisions about whether sick kids can go home, and we can't decide what to have for dinner. But it was really helpful for us to just have a list to go back to. These are things the kids like. These are things that have been successful. I try not to be gender specific, but in my household, I'm the person who looks around the house and sees, like, this needs to be done, this needs to be done, and it bothers me if it's not getting done. And my husband was the person who wasn't seeing those things, but was happy to do them if I told him that they needed to be done. So we had a dad's to-do list. That was really helpful for me because I could communicate things that I felt would be helpful for him to do. For the kids, I took a bunch of poker chips and I wrote down activities on each one, like read a book, make a restaurant, write a play, go play outside, play a video game, whatever. And I put those all in a box, and when the kids told me they were bored, I told them, go to the box and get a poker chip. So having lists of ideas to try to just, all those things that keep coming up over and over again, that will help you to just respond to that quickly and not spend a lot of time on it. And then planning and stocking up. So, of course, planning your lunches and your dinners for the week, having things in the household. A couple of things that were really helpful for me. Anyone who has kids knows that you're going to want to have poster board in your house. But having school supplies, those kids are going to come to you at 10 p.m. one day and say, I need a poster board for tomorrow. That's going to happen to everyone who has a kid. But generally speaking, just having the school supplies in your house ready to go, those are going to be very helpful. I had a gift closet that was helpful as well. When the birthday parties come up or around the holidays, it's always like bring a new unwrapped gift to donate to this or that. So I had it ready to go. Whenever my kids were on teams, I was always the mom that would buy an extra uniform, an extra pair of socks. I didn't want to have to worry about having that clean and ready to go for the next game. So just kind of thinking ahead and planning and having everything stocked up can be really helpful. We also like to have a little bit of cash in our house because our kids are always coming home like, I need $20 for this. And like, none of us have any cash because we all use plastic now or Apple Pay. So it's good to have a little bit of cash in the house as well. Just thinking ahead and making sure you are stocked up. This also is tiled, there's other ones, but we use the sort of tracking things as well. So first of all, just making sure that you have a place for keys or shoes, backpacks, making sure that you have a place where everything's going to go so you can save all that time of looking for something. But if you still lose things, it can be really helpful to have a tracker on it. So you can have a tracker in the wallet, you can have a tracker on the keys, anything that's important, and then you can just beep it and find where it is in your house. Thinking about delegating, this is another thing that you can do for, I'm going to touch on one more thing also. With kids, young kids, it can be helpful to sort of plan out their clothes for the week. It saves you with morning battles. And also kids oftentimes are supposed to wear, pajamas on Friday or silly socks on Thursday. And I would always forget that and be the bad mom whose kid went to school without silly socks. So it can be really helpful in terms of your time management to get that ahead of time as well. Delegation. When you do your mapping out of your time log and you look at all your activities and you've decided your goals, you're going to find things that you don't really need to do. So you ask yourself, what can I delegate out? What could I outsource? What could I do less well? We all want to do things well, so we all tend to really do a good job on things that maybe you can kind of just not do such a great job on. And what can I not do at all? I was that mom that didn't want to put together beautiful little snack bags for every Valentine's Day for all the kids in the class. I just said I'm not going to do that. I don't like people's Facebook posts. I don't, say happy birthday to everyone on Facebook. There's things that you decide for yourself you're going to spend your time doing or not doing. This is a long list of things that you could outsource, and I think our tendency is to feel like, we're going to pay someone to do this? That seems so bougie. That seems so not me. I'm an emergency medicine physician. I just do stuff. I get it done. But if you really think about the fact that you are buying that time, you have a limited amount of time, right? So if you've got the money and the wherewithal and you're buying that time to do something that you don't find joy in, that's not really adding to you personally or your career, and that amount of time you can now spend on something that you do find joy in, that is in your work or your home life balance that's important to you, then that can be really helpful. So looking at where you can outsource things, looking at where you can give up activities that you're doing completely that are really not something that you actually need to do, and looking at where you can do things a little less well and not spend so much time on them, and everyone will be just fine. It can be really helpful to make a don't want to do list. So maybe sit down and just list all the things that you're doing that you really don't want to do, and then look for ways that you can change that. And maybe it's just swapping something with your spouse or somebody in your family. Maybe it doesn't bother them that much. They'd be willing to do that, and you'll do something else. Prioritizing, of course, you're going to prioritize your activities and then figure out if you could delegate or outsource the other things. You can try giving something to someone else, looking for win-win situations. So maybe you're on a committee that is not part of your career goals, it's not floating your boat. There's somebody else in your department that really fits more with what they're doing. You think they'd be excited and bring a lot of ideas to it. You can talk to them, but you want it to be a win-win situation, of course. You don't want to dump on somebody. But maybe there's a way that you can delegate something to someone else that's helpful for them as well. If you do delegate, of course, you can't set it and forget it. You need to be clear with them on what needs to be done and make sure that it's going to still get done. And we think about delegating down, that's mentorship. So to people junior to us, we kind of mentor them through writing that book chapter, we help them with something. And that also helps with our own burnout, because I think everyone probably realized when they help somebody else, junior to them, it gives you great feelings of mentorship and can help you. But we forget also that we can delegate up. So a lot of times someone who is senior to us, like our chair or supervisor, someone higher up in the hospital, they could get something done like that we're turning our wheels, trying to get done. So we're trying to meet up with somebody, and if we just ask someone, they could connect us really quickly, we could get that networking opportunity. So remembering to both delegate up and down. And another thing that I read in the book, Eat That Frog, which I thought was really helpful, was that you want to be efficient in terms of micromanaging is a very inefficient thing. So if you're micromanaging someone and you're telling them how to do it and you're watching them closely, that can be time inefficient. Whereas if you teach them and you trust them and let them go, and then keep following up and making sure that they're doing okay, it's both helpful for them and it's also more time efficient for you. And the same at home, they talk about teaching your children to be more independent and teaching them to do things that they can do on their own, like make their own snacks or make their lunch. So multitasking. A lot of people talk about multitasking, and as emergency physicians, we think we like to multitask a lot. Most people in time management will say multitasking is the art of messing up several things at once. Multitasking is really not time efficient, because what you're actually doing is task switching a lot. So you're doing something on one thing, and then you're moving here and you're moving back, and what happens is you're doing that startup time every time, right? So you kind of have to get back in the groove each time. So they don't really recommend multitasking. And there is this concept of the busy versus the productive person. So the busy person is running around, looks like they're doing a lot, they're checking their email, they're replying right away, they seem like they're good at a bunch of little things, they're multitasking, but they are not being productive because they're not focusing their time, a big time period, on the thing that is really important to advance their career, the thing that's important to them. They are not eating the frog, right? They're spending a lot of time on the little tadpoles. So when I talk about multitasking, what I'm really talking about is double dipping. When can you take all the time that you spent on one thing and either make that something else that's beneficial at work, or combine work and home? So one way to double dip would be if you wrote the background of a grant that you're submitting, and then that became a book chapter or a review article or a lecture that you give to the residents, or a lecture that you give nationally, or a blog post, or a podcast that you make, whatever it might be. You can take all that work and that expertise that you developed and put it in multiple sources. And then another way to multitask is to combine things at home. So our treadmill is in front of our TV, and we watched all of 24, all of Prison Break on the treadmill. It's great because it motivates you, right? Because you really want to know what happens. Like, just think if you watched Game of Thrones on the treadmill only. Like, you would get on that treadmill so that you could watch the next episode. So you can exercise and do something else. You can read journals. Sometimes at my kids' soccer game, I would just walk or kind of jog around the field while they were playing to get my exercise in. And being ready for little chunks of time. So if you have your journals with you in the car or on your phone, you can read them when you have a little chunk of time if you're waiting for pickup or you're at a carpool or something like that. And then there's different ways to kind of mix work and life. So I've heard this suggested before. You can bring one of your older kids along with you on a national meeting, and if they can amuse themselves and read or whatever when you're actually attending the meeting, and then you can go explore that city together. That's a great way to spend really special, concentrated time with one of your kids or your spouse. Scheduling dates, particularly with the spouse and with each kid, setting that time aside. I did this where I made my pleasure reading my high school kids assigned English class books. It was actually a really great way to connect with them. And there were a lot of really good classics that I didn't read when I was in high school, for whatever reason wasn't assigned to me. So I got to read, To Kill a Mockingbird for the first time. I read a lot of good books that way. Doing medical demonstrations at your kids' school, turning your expertise into a PTA newsletter article, kind of, being a part of the school in that way can be helpful. My kids did something called CPR in schools, and I helped them out with that. And then having your kid be a sim model, have your kid kind of participate with you in terms of your education can be helpful as well. So thinking outside the box. Then another part of our time management is technology, and I spoke to the junior faculty development group, and I think they are probably pretty adept at technology. And then as you kind of go into more my generation, sometimes we're a little bit less adept. But it kind of goes back to the same thing. If you can put a block of time into learning to use a piece of technology, it can save you so much time down the road, right? It seems like you don't have the time to go ahead and do that right now, but if you just set it aside and do it, then it will help you in the future. So some people maybe don't type that well, and if you spend the time to learn to type, that can help you a lot with writing. But beyond typing, there's things like learning how to use Excel's functions, or learning how to use a biostatistics program, learning how to use a data management software program. And it seems kind of overwhelming, but there's always going to be resources available either at your institution or online or in your department to do that. It's just about scheduling the time in your agenda to do it, taking that time, and then if you get yourself adept at that technology, it may save you a ton of time in the future. Cloud storage, I think I talked about. It's very helpful to have all your stuff on the cloud, and being able to digitize documents so that they're searchable, learning how to do that. Sometimes Skyping into a meeting, so if you're going to spend 45 minutes to an hour driving in, and at my institution finding a parking space, and then 45 minutes to an hour driving home, and it's just one meeting, maybe you can learn to Skype in, maybe your department can learn how to do that. So bringing technology to your department. And then depending on how much charting you do, and a lot of people when they're more senior, it varies how much charting they do. But if you find in your time management log that you are spending a lot of time charting, it's really important to become efficient at your charting. So that comes to being a good typist, but also making good use of dot phrases and macros and things like that. The residents will all be able to teach us how to do that. They're all good at that. But it's important to be able to do that, and then to leave the doc box at the end of your shift and get that charting done and go home. So I think a lot of times people will stay around, they're chatting, there's kind of charting, but they're getting interrupted, and then they're talking some more. The most efficient residents that I see will either leave and go chart somewhere else, or they'll put headphones on, which signals I'm charting and then I'm leaving, and so then nobody's talking to them. But again, if you're saying yes to hanging around and talking, you're saying no to going home to your family. So you're not saying it out loud, you're not saying to your family, I'm not coming home, I don't like you, but no, but you are saying it in a way, so just remembering all that time that you're frittering away doing that means you're not going home. Technology at home, there's a lot of things that you can use to get to dinner on the table, to be more time efficient. I won't go in great detail, but on the website I do have links to different, the Instant Pot has kind of changed our household. I don't know if anyone feels the same way, but we love that. It gets dinner on the table, it's great. I stopped going to Starbucks a lot. I started using the Keurig a lot, and I think if you have teenage boys, you want a panini press in your house when they're teenagers, because they get hungry a lot, and they can go make themselves sandwiches, and it's great. The last topic I'm going to touch on is sleep. We all know, of course, that sleep is difficult in emergency medicine, and that night shifts mess up our circadian rhythm. There is a fair amount of research on what we can do to try to minimize that, because what happens when our circadian rhythm is messed up and we are feeling low because of our sleep schedule is we're not productive. And so we get in that cycle of not being productive. We're at work, our body is physically at work, but because of all the basically jet lag that we feel from our sleep cycle, we're not being productive. And then as we're not productive, we're not feeling we're accomplishing anything, and we get in that bad cycle, burnout. This is from a BMJ article where they sort of collated all the research on sleep and night shifts. It's very helpful, and they came up with this infographic. They do recommend, and people were laughing in the last session, that you don't do more than 2 night shifts in a row, preferably that you do just 1 night shift. So if you just do the 1 night shift, you come off of it, you don't schedule any meetings, you go home and you really sleep, maybe for 5 or 6 hours, your circadian rhythm will not have switched. So you can maintain your circadian rhythm on the day cycle and still be productive the next day. When you do 2, it's a little harder, but you can still do it. When you get up to 3, then your circadian rhythm will switch. Now, the opposite of that, if your department is the kind of department, or you're the person who's the kind of person who likes to schedule a bunch of night shifts in a row, is to go ahead and let your circadian rhythm switch. Just do it less often. It's the switching back and forth that's the big problem, right? So some departments apparently will try alternative schedules where 1 or 2 or 3 faculty take the bulk of the night shifts for that month, and then the other 11 months of the year, they get to be in the group that takes maybe just a couple night shifts that month. You could do that. So you could have night people for just that month. Some groups I know are fortunate enough to have people that are the night people that take all night shifts. We have one in our department who takes all night shifts pretty much. And that's great, and that lessens all the night shifts for everybody else. Why being successful before breakfast doesn't work for me is I'm a real night owl. So I've decided to do just evenings, just swing and night shifts. I said I don't want any day shifts. Nobody seems to have a problem with that. Me saying I won't do any day shifts, so that's great. And then it's good for me because I can just stay on the circadian rhythm of being a night person for the most part. I'm lucky also that my academic job does not require a lot of morning meetings. So if you're in an administrative role where you have a lot of morning meetings, that's obviously not going to work. But you find the way that works for you. So they do recommend that when you come off your night shift that you avoid sunlight. That's going to really reset your brain. So wear those UV blocking sunglasses home and then get straight home to a dim, dark bedroom and go to sleep as quickly as you can. So keeping it dark, putting the blackout shades up, keeping it quiet. You can turn your phone, I don't ever want to make my kids not be able to contact me, but what I can do is create a group of my family only and then put my phone on Do Not Disturb except for family. And so you can create it so that nobody else can call you and you just block out everybody else. And then really talking to everyone in your family and say, you guys really need to respect this is my sleep time. Kind of have a little family meeting. This is the time that mom's going to sleep and you're not going to bug me. And making sure that it's dark, quiet, and cold. So having it cool is helpful for sleep as well. And I think a lot of times we go, I really should put blackout shades up. I should do this. I should do that. And then another year goes by and we don't do it. And it's that same sort of thing. If you kind of get over the hump, set it on your agenda. On Saturday, I'm going to go to Home Depot. I'm going to buy the blackout shades. I'm going to put them up and just get it done. It will save you in the future all that time spent with poor sleep. They recommend that you not exercise right before you're trying to go to sleep, that you stay away from alcohol, and then also that you stay off your screens. So there are screen apps that you can do to change the lighting on the screen so that it doesn't have that blue light as much, which keeps you awake. But it's probably best, if you can, to be off the screens entirely. And then the big one that I think we do a lot is we go, okay, yeah, sure, I can meet after the night shift. I'll meet. And then it gets stretched out, right? Okay, I can meet at 9. Yeah, I can meet at 10. And I'll go home and sleep after that. But really trying to be scrupulous about your schedule and making sure that you don't schedule those meetings after a night shift can be very important. So these are some things. And then the other thing is that for some people, white noise can be helpful to keep them sleeping. There's a new thing called pink noise and then even brown noise, which has more lower frequency that is supposedly even better for sleeping. And there's YouTube sites you can go to that will play you 8 hours of pink noise. So you can just put that on and have that running while you go to sleep. Or you can buy expensive, pink noise generators as well. I think as EM doctors, we have a lot of the skills that help us with work-life balance. So we're used to prioritizing, we're used to finding the sick patients, we're used to finding the important things, and we're used to kind of going back and forth and task switching, so we can do some of that. We are a very decisive specialty, right? That's part of half of what we do is just making a decision and going with it. So we are able to make choices quickly. We are also able to accept less than perfection. We often have patients come in, we don't have the full history, we don't have a lot of information, and we're able to deal with that. We are good at communication and conflict resolution, and those are important skills both in work and home life. And we have flexible work hours, so if we're really diligent about our time management and our schedule and very good about putting everything on the calendar, we can make the time more easily to go to that school function or whatever than someone who works a regular 8 to 5 job that has to be in clinic every single Monday through Friday. And then to a point, we're not fazed by night shifts, so when we have young kids and they're getting up at night, we can deal with that too. Or teenagers getting home at 1 and 2 in the morning. I liked this from this blog, The Choice Minimal Lifestyle, and the idea is that if you spend a lot of time on relatively unimportant choices, that's not time efficient. So we can get a little bit of a decision fatigue at work, and the idea is to keep your choices at home or minimize unimportant choices at home. So he talks about setting a money risk limit, like $50 or $100, and if the difference between two choices you're making is less than that money risk, so I'm deciding between these two brands, or I'm deciding between these two people who are going to come work on my house, and the difference is not that much. Just make a choice and go with it. Don't spend a lot of time belaboring the choice. And then talks about embracing routines that work. So, if your family likes to have grilled cheese for dinner every Friday, not feeling guilty about not offering variety or about having, and just embracing the routines that work for you and that take choices out of your life. And then you don't have to spend a lot of time belaboring those decisions, and you have more time for everything else. These particular things he talked about, not worrying about pleasing everyone, not wasting time feeling sorry for yourself, and not wasting energy on things you can't control. And I do think that's important too. We can spend a lot of time sort of complaining about things that we can't change or things that already happened, or we can take that time and be productive and forward ourselves in our career. 10 signs that you're an emergency medicine parent. This is just fun, but something that I think I've done all 10. So you're mashing hot dogs and grapes. You've performed a minor procedure in your living room. How many of us have Dermabond at home? I think all of us do. Your child is completely vaccinated, including the optional ones. My kids all got a 3rd MMR for college. After a minor fall, your comforting hug includes a brief neurologic C-spine and abdominal exam. You scope out the playgrounds that don't have monkey bars. Your child has had greater than 1 subspecialty visit before age 2 with an eventual diagnosis of normal exam. I do remember one time my son had a rash and he saw 3 dermatologists in 2 days. You apply antibiotic ointment to bruises. Your child wears a helmet for a spin on the big wheel. Your 18-month-old well child checkup, your child compliantly opens his mouth and says, ah, and you overhear your 3-year-old daughter ask her father, what's the plan? I think these are true for many of us. A couple of final quotes. This one, again, from this side of doctoring. When feeling torn between family and work, it is important to remember that you suffer from an abundance of blessings. The privilege of doing work that you love and having a family that you cherish are causes for rejoicing in spite of your fatigue and strain. There is no steady state. You will never achieve a durable balance between career and home. Flux is the norm, the only constant. You will always be giving more in one area or another. You are astride a teeter-totter. Don't be frozen in the middle, trying to keep it perfectly level. Learn to prance, slide, skip, skid, and skitter from one end of the seesaw to the other. And I think that's something that as emergency physicians we're very good at. We know that we sometimes are in one place and we sometimes are focusing our efforts more in another place, and we can go back and forth. And then this final quote, imagine life as a game in which you are juggling 5 balls in the air. You name them, work, family, health, friends, and spirit, and you're keeping all of these in the air. You will soon understand that work is a rubber ball. If you drop it, it will bounce back. But the other 4 balls, family, health, friends, and spirit, are made of glass. If you drop one of these, they will be irrevocably scuffed, marked, nicked, damaged, or even shattered. They will never be the same. You must understand that and strive for balance in your life. So these are the 8 time management tools that we discussed, and they are all on the website, each with a separate link that you can go and look at the site. And I put several links there, and I will continue to add to it. So, and if you have great ideas, please feel free to contact me, and I can add them as well, because everyone has different things that work for them in terms of time management. And my parting shot that I always tell everyone is floss or exercise. So if you didn't have time to exercise that day, just floss, and then you will feel that you have really accomplished something, so you can feel good about yourself.
Unfortunately, I think we're almost out of time, but thank you so much, Kelly. And just want to say, she presented so many, probably 100 tips, and so, but this isn't just passive listening. And you need just take 3 of those things and try to institute them. And some of them can be remarkably simple. Turn off your email notifications, but just try to do 3 of them, and you will be a better time manager. But thanks so much, Kelly. It was a wonderful work and a real favor to the specialty to compile all this. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.